Hi, this is Al. We are here on Tuesday night, October, Julia, what's the date, 8th?
It is October 8th.
8th. And we are beginning this live-ish webcast, ModPo webcast. Not broadcasting live, but we're recording this for you all, and we hope that you enjoy it. And at some point in the middle of this thing, right, Chris Martin? That's right. If YouTube fixes its technical difficulties, we're going to go live. But at this point, we have some friends in the room. We have Laura, who came down from New York. Jason, give Laura the mic. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Al.
Welcome to
Thank
ModPo.
you.
Welcome to the Writer's House.
It's very lovely here.
So you're a lawyer by day and a ModPoian by night.
Yes.
Good. Who's your favorite poet so far?
Oh, boy. No, I actually have to say Stein.
Stein. Wow.
Which is surprising because in college I hated Stein. So
What
progress
college?
has been made. Ohio University?
In Athens.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome, Laura from New York. We also have Ken, who was here last time, who is Philadelphia and Central Mexico. We have Jeremy Dixon, who's been here all week from Wales. And can we get a camera on, Jeremy? Yeah, you're doing that. Zach's doing about 5 things. Jeremy's been here all week, and his vacation is framed, is bounded on either side by ModPo Webcast. So, ModPo Sandwich. It's so great that you're here. And Eric, as usual, and Jamie is here. And, of course, Lily. Get that on Lily. Lily's taking phone calls. Now, we've done something weird. We've put the word out via Julia
Yes, we have.
that people should call us.
People should call and post to the discussion forums and post to Twitter. I don't know who I'm speaking to right now since we're not online. But the point
You're
is...
speaking to us. No, you're speaking to people who will watch this as a recording.
Yes.
Okay.
For the sake of posterity,
All right.
we are taking questions.
All right. And we have Steve McLaughlin doing audio, and he's amazing, as usual. And Chris and Zach are just watching YouTube go through its maintenance. And painful to watch. Okay, so we're going to begin. We're talking about Week 5 poems. I'll just, a couple of shout-outs. Zach, you ready to do some camera work? All right, first of all, this photograph was taken by Linda Cabot, who bought a ModPo mug. Do we have any of those here? I don't think we do. A ModPo mug, and she, instead of drinking coffee out of it, she set up for her paintbrushes. And we encourage everybody who's bought a ModPo mug to put it somewhere in situ and to take a picture of it. That would be fun. A couple of other shout-outs. Jason Brightwell, who's been active both in the forums and on Facebook, writes, possibly planning a trip to check out the Kelly Writer's House. I'm pretty close, just down in Baltimore, or as they say in Baltimore, Baltimore. Think it would be neat to at least check it out. Not being a student at UPenn, wondering if I'd be welcome? Lily, what's the answer to that?
Yes.
Jason, you will always be welcome. Come for a webcast, come for a visit, come anytime. Come after ModPo is done. Come to the Writer's House. You are all welcome. One more shout out from Myri Petraka, who wrote the most beautiful thing. And after reading Myri's comment, I went and got a cup of coffee, and they put caffeine in it. And I usually drink decaffeinated, and it was a quadruple. And I thought it was decaf. So after I read this thing, I got very jazzed up, and then I realized why Myra, no disrespect, meant. But so I'm really, I hope this webcast goes on till 3 a.m. because I am ready to go. It'll be Jason and me at 3 a.m. Anyway, I'm ready to go. Anyway, Myra says, today I want to thank ModPo for opening up our minds. Whether we read highly experimental or very conservative poets, they open up minds to the possibilities of life. In my everyday environment, I work at a bank. I usually feel trapped, fake, angry, alone. I am lucky enough to be in love with my wonderful lover husband. TMI there, Myra. But it also takes a group of people like those I see in the videos and those I read on the forum to give me hope that not all people are afraid to truly live, that not all people think that a house in the suburbs is the most important thing in the world. ModPo people is my tribe. You are my kind of people. You make me feel like I belong. How do you like that, huh? Myra, you make me drink caffeine. That is so fantastic. Okay, Julia Block, let's hear a question from the forums. But before we hear it, I would like to invite Jeremy to come up and take the extra spot at the table. Wow. Jeremy Dixon, join us. Let's quickly, all in favor of making him an honorary TA for this webcast, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? You're in, pal. Okay. Julia, pose a question. Jeremy, you got to answer it.
Okay, this is a really great question on the discussion forums from Christina Rao. And it has
Christina Rao is really good on the forums.
and it has to do with Gwendolyn Brooks.
She's everywhere on the forums.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Okay.
Absolutely everywhere. And her question is about Gwendolyn Brooks's poem "Truth," and I'm really hoping we get to talk a little bit about this poem today.
Jeremy, here's the text. Do you remember it? Because if you don't remember, you do. Okay, go ahead. Can we bring Jeremy's? Thank you.
And so Christina offers an interpretation. She doesn't really phrase it as a question per se, but I'm going to kind of raise it as a question. And I
Yeah.
should say, too, that this is actually a question that came up in the Brooks's sub-forum. So if you're looking for it, that's where it is. And she says most of truth is in questions. And I like the way she says that because, of course, she's referring to the title of the poem, Truth,
Right.
but she's also saying something about truth per se.
Right.
And she suggests that, and she makes me wonder if this is the case, so maybe, Jeremy, you'll have some thoughts about this. Are the questions meant to incite us to action? Is the speaker of this poem trying to get us to do something? Or are they more open-ended? Or what do you think the questions are doing in this poem?
That was a tough one.
Yes.
You know what,
Thank
Jeremy?
you.
Yeah. You know what?
I'm glad I came.
Let's put Emily on the spot and then come back to you.
Okay, thank
You can
you.
respond to Emily. Hey, Emily.
Hey Al, how's it going?
How are you?
Good.
Hey, Dave Poplar. So, Emily, take a shot at this.
Sure. What I would say to this question is that, well, the questions are always confrontational in the sense that either they demand an answer as a legitimate inquiry or they're rhetorical and they're making a confrontational point. There's something polemical, something ideological about it. And as such, when you read a question, you always answer it in some respect, either as an action or as a redefinition or a definition of your position, your cultural or ideological position. So yeah, I think that these questions are meant to incite us maybe not to a literal action, but to some type of internal action, a derivation of our position in regards to what this question is soliciting from us.
Jeremy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they're quite gentle questions, though.
Brooks's questions.
Yeah, they're not a call to arms in a very demonstrative way. To me, they're kind of reflective questions, aren't they? They're to make you think.
Think about what?
To think about if you actually thought about what she's said before, in a way. They're almost prompts to something that you should know that you don't know or they don't remember that you know.
Oh, well put. Well put. Julia, do you want to look for another question?
Yeah.
I'm going to steal this back.
Yeah, I think this is related in some ways to Brooks, too, and it's a question that comes up on the Webcast sub-forums, and it's from Jim Valero, who invites us to say a little bit about an African-American modernism. So, probably a lot of folks notice that we have several different African-American poets in this week, in the different chapters for this week.
Right.
Claude McKay and Gwendolyn Brooks are two especially that I know we'll probably try to get to tonight. So can we talk about, he wonders, is it the case that there are many different various modernisms instead of just one?
Wow,
I
huge questions.
I like this question coming after what Jeremy said about truth because of that like great questioning function in that poem.
Well, I'll start with a little footnote, and then I'll pass it along. Maybe we can pick up a few comments. Maybe Jason has a thing to say about it. I bet Eric has something to say about that. I'll just say as a footnote that I urge you to listen not because it's so articulate, but because he has the answer to this question, to the audio intro for week 5 by me, in which I talk about some poems and poets that we could have put in this course, in this section, but didn't. That is to say, there was a great deal of interaction among so-called Harlem Renaissance poets and modernist experiment. There was admiration on the part of left-wing poets and African-American Harlem Renaissance affiliated poets and people like Stein and Williams and so forth. We picked poets because this was the part of the course where we were trying to feature poets who had doubts about modernism, who were concerned that modernist experiment would not reach a great number of people, would not be taken in by the people who needed it, and would not be responsive to social and economic and racial reality of the time, particularly the 1930s. So we featured Cullen, but we could have featured Jean Toomer. And so we made choices that figured McKay and Cullen, who are working under formal constraints, but agree to live under those constraints. And insofar as they liberate themselves, or insofar as they find freedom in poetry, it's by busting through those constraints or working at them, rather than with poets who are modernists who would start out on the assumption that you wouldn't use a traditional form. So the answer, historically speaking, is yes. Yes, Harlem Renaissance poets, other African-American poets, as well as the communist poets, who also are thought of as being against modernism, consorted with modernism, learned about modernism, read Eliot and Stein with gratitude, and ModPo doesn't do a good job of showing that literary history. Rather, we're showing something else. We're showing a kind of resistance. And the reason I like the resistance is after Stein is because a lot of us got into Stein, but we also worried that Stein was kind of drifting off away from social reality to the point where she was sort of in a bubble somewhere. Jason, can you give a quick, different approach to that question? Then we'll get the mic back to Eric.
Sure. I think just to look at the Brooks poem and to think about the questions there, which in my reading, it's the sun comes knocking at the door that we've been waiting for.
Right.
And the refrain of questions that follow has to do with, well, if what we have wished for arrives, then who do we become? Or do we not, shall we not this, shall we not that? And there's I think, a kind of anxiety of how to preserve, and the word, as soon as the word preserve would be in counter force to modernism, to make it new, or
Right.
to push forward. So to push forward, or to let the sun in, and to for everything to for difference not to make a difference at last, is a thing that I think makes Brooks ask us to pause before.
Ah, interesting. So interesting. Eric, do you want to take a shot at this? Or I had a sense from your facial expression that you wanted to say something.
So I'm going to talk just for a second about a book by, I believe his name is Professor John Carey. It's quite an influential book from the late 90s called The Intellectuals and the Masses, which puts forward an argument about modernism, which was quite influential, which essentially states that just as a mass reading public came into an existence and reading was no longer for an elite, that artists decided to re-enclose themselves and reform an elite through making their work more difficult and this book is something I'd certainly encourage people to read and consider after the course, thinking about how much they agree with the argument, what the limits of that argument are.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly seems to me that it is, in many respects, a reductive argument, and it certainly depends on a reading of modernism, which sees it almost as a ideological block, when in fact modernism is quite various. And another book which I really love about modernism is called The Myth of the Modern by Perry Meisel, which talks about two of the main strains of modernism, one which follows from Arnold and goes on through T.S. Eliot, and another strain that begins with Walter Pater, and I think also Oscar Wilde probably, and then runs through James Joyce. And there are really significantly different impulses at the heart of different creative modernisms. I mean, at least that's my sense of it.
Right.
And therefore, it's not surprising to me that so many poets did take a different path and used modernism in a different way. Some may have been mistrustful on the limitations that it might have imposed on an audience.
So let me just, before we get another, are we on the air?
I think we're ready to give it a shot.
Okay.
We're on Penn Sound Radio.
We are on Penn Sound Radio.
But I think we can get this going.
Okay, good. You want to turn the camera to me? All right. So if you're watching this as a recording, yeah? Hi, everybody. We're 45 minutes delayed by YouTube. So we're grumbling about YouTube, but we are here, and what we've done is we recorded the first part of the webcast that you couldn't see live, but maybe we'll splice it together and show it to you as a recording. But I will reintroduce some characters in the room. We have Laura, who came from New York City, and Ken, who is not yet on his way back to central Mexico, and Jeremy Dixon is still here from Wales, who's sitting at the table, and Eric is here, and Jamie, and we have Emily and Dave and Julia and myself, and the usual characters, including Lily, who is taking phone calls at 215-573-9752. We hope that you're getting the word out. Are you going to send an email to everybody in the course?
Yes, so they can now see us and hear us.
Okay.
Yes.
So send the word out, and maybe we'll get some people to join us. So, and thank you in advance to Chris Martin and Zach Cardiner, who are both going to have to splice together a recording and the live show. Yeah, guys? Yeah, they're nodding. Okay.
And we have Allie and Max at least joining us.
All right. And can Allie and Max hear me? Not yet. I see Max. Max, can you hear me? Allie, can you hear me? 739-752. We hope that you're getting the word out.
They're doing something weird.
All right. All right. So while we're waiting to get them up to speed, I was going to say something in response to Eric's comment about many modernisms. Oh, you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to do something really weird. What I'd like to do is ask a bunch of you to toss out onto the table in a phrase or a word, no more than that, qualities, tenets, attributes of the modernism that ModPo features among the many modernisms that are possible. And I'll start with one so you get the gist of what I'm trying to do here, okay? All right? So we have found that modernist poems thrive on openness. They are open rather than closed. Okay, and I mean that in the following sense, that for centuries, many poets, possibly most poets, were committed to a poem that concluded and wrapped things up, right? And left you thinking about a wholeness that had just occurred. And modernism wanted to break that, starting with the sun that Emily Dickinson leans on, and it turns out to be a dash, and she falls over because there's nothing to lean on. Okay, so I said my phrase, which is openness rather than close. Okay, Emily, another attribute? Give it a shot. You can do this. You can do this. Lean forward. Yes?
I'd say multiply rather than singly determined.
Okay, multiply rather than singly determined. Dave Poplar, throw one out. Could be anything.
Take a step backwards to see more clearly.
All right. Steve, can we pick him up? Steve McLaughlin, can we pick up his audio? Yeah, okay. What did you mean by that?
It's about being able to see what's going on in a larger sense, in a more structural sense, and getting a better picture of it from afar than what we're used to being up close.
Okay, I'm going to have to learn more about that one. But insofar as what you just said suggested a certain self-consciousness about what's being represented.
It's paying attention to how something is
Yes.
presented.
Okay, cool. Julia Block?
Sorry, I'm emailing everyone in the course to let them know we're up on the air.
All right.
But
Equality of modernism and emailing 35,000 people.
Engaging in
It's-
some digital modernism.
You need some
I am.
caffeine is what you
Yes.
need.
Yes.
Okay. Jeremy, modernism, attribute.
Any subject is worthy of a poem.
Right. There is no such thing. As William Carlos Williams said, and William Wallace Stevens, there's no such thing as material unsuited to a poem. Okay. Jason, a phrase, and then we're going to pass the mic around. Modernism, equality.
More to come.
More to come, meaning in media res and no end, just middles.
I don't know.
Oh, more to come. Oh, I gave you one. All right.
Those were my two phrases.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But this phrase, what I'm speaking now is no longer speaking in a modernist tongue.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for making things really clear. Laura, modernism.
Escape
From
from tradition and traditional meaning.
right. There's a certain polemical quality to the first decades of modernism, and so it becomes a quality of the work. HD's perfect example of that. She both presents the thing in this imagist version of modernism, but she's also so adamant about doing so that it feels programmatic. All right. Pass the mic back to Eric or Ken. Let's go to Ken. Quality of modernism as we've been seeing it.
A new approach to the relationship between form and content.
Absolutely. And a self-consciousness about content, about form. Yes, Eric?
Replace the full stop, replace the period with a question mark.
Yeah, there's another one. Thank you. And Jamie? Hi, Jamie.
Hi. I wanted to speak specifically to County Cullen's incident because I think that that's a really powerful poem. So I think that for my statement about that, whether it be modernist or anti-modernist, it's the oppressor speaking back, the oppressed speaking back to the oppressor using its own language.
So, wow. So you've just taken us to a big place here. Because both that poem and the McKay poem, by using what Dave Poplar now famously called the Trojan horse strategy of riding straight into trouble, using a seemingly acceptable form, right? Basically, you can radicalize something that's old.
Right,
and
and
you're
of course,
suggesting that's potentially called a modernist technique.
potentially, but of course the major critique of Cullen was that he sounded too white. So what's that tension about?
And you're the first one to actually put it that bluntly. No, I'm not in the history of the study of poetry. In ModPo.
Okay.
Yeah. She said, what's that all about? I don't know if we're going to answer that question. Are Max and Allie tuned in here?
Yes.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi, Max. Hi, Allie.
how's it going?
Hey, Allie, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Max, you seem a little tired.
It's been an exhausting few weeks. So
Oh,
yeah.
Max. Let's give Max some thumbs up. Come on. I don't know if you can see us, Max, but...
Oh, I can. It reminds me of the movie Gladiator.
Okay.
Which is voting well.
Uh-oh. Julia's going with the thumbs down.
Just kidding. Just kidding, Max. Just kidding.
215-573-9752. We hope that some of you who are watching will call us. Julia, what's going on in the forums or in Twitter?
Well, people are finding us and they're tuning in, which is great. So
Yes,
just
good.
give me a second to pull up one of the questions from the forums.
Okay. Let me just put a coda on Jamie's point about Cullen. If pushed hard, I'm going to say that Cullen's impulse is a non-modernist impulse, not an anti-modernist impulse, but a non-modernist impulse. However, I totally respect what Jamie is saying, which is what we all said about both McKay and Cullen in this case, which is that their use of traditional form was subversive. In McKay's case, really subversive. In Cullen's case, agonized, not happy, right? Not sanguine. And in both cases, therefore, we get doubts about the constraint. And in Cullen's case, the constraint goes along with the constraint of living life among people whose impulse is racist hatred. And that constraint gets punctured. That constraint gets put to the test. So, and in McKay's case, it could be argued that instead of doing the modernist frontal attack on the sonnet, he uses the sonnet and produces the same effect you get, although more politically astute, as you get in John Peel Bishop's Fuck You Half-Ass sonnet, where pretty much the same thing as strategy is happening. And we consider that impulse to be modernist at the end of chapter 2. So this is really, I mean, we're trying to be pedagogically on-off 1-0. We're trying to make the distinctions clear, but as soon as you start talking intelligently about all this, it all collapses. So even though Cullen is never listed among modernists, he does something that is completely aware of what modernism gives him a right to do with respect to a traditional form. Jeremy?
Would the modernists know that they were being modernists at the time? Or is it something that we...
Oh, I think almost every one of them, certainly the ones that I think there was this, for better or worse, Jeremy, a self-consciousness about the so-called revolution of the word, right? But it's when you get to, you get into later periods, right, when people take some of the qualities and tenets that we went around and listed, they take them, and then they do lots of other things with them, that it becomes kind of irrelevant to decide that this poem from after World War II or this poem from the 1960s is modernist, when that kind of polemical consciousness has faded away. So, but I'd say in the teens and 20s and maybe the 30s, so many of them felt that way. Julia Block, what's happening?
So there's a really interesting thread started by Ellen Zunon. Sorry, Ellen, if I'm mispronouncing your name. But she posted, I think it's exciting that in this day and age of so much emphasis on the STEM subject areas, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, that a MOOC about modern poetry can attract 34,000 participants. And she's inviting us to kind of reflect on that phenomenon. And what followed from Ellen's initial comment is a really interesting discussion of when and where poetry becomes really important politically and socially. So I think this follows nicely from the discussion we've been having about modernism and sort of the
good question.
Urgency.
Max and Allie, you guys were part of ModPo the first year, and we all were really excited. We are still excited. But last year we were just wading into this ocean, and we had no idea. And what are your comments as to how did you react to the excitement by a lot of people about such a thing? Max, you want to start first?
Sure. That's that's all I got. No. I'm out of practice, Al. How do I respond to the excitement that people?
Yeah. Well, the question was, how do we get to the point where, in the world of STEM MOOCs, why is this MOOC generating so much excitement?
Well, I think it's caught up in a few different things, and one of them is definitely the social media element that a format like ModPo and that the Coursera formats in general have built into them, and that ModPo probably does the best to capitalize on compared to all the STEM subjects. So there's a necessarily social element to learning, and especially to the poems and the poetry we're talking about, and that I think is really emphasized in the way that we're using this network. So to see people getting excited means that it's working, means that this approach is successful in this format, and I think it's hopeful for people like myself who are hoping to enter the humanities, to be academics and scholars and teachers, to see that people around the world do indeed care in this climate that's supposedly become more and more attuned or more focused or obsessed with STEM, and especially with an education that's remunerative.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Max. You're not out of practice. Allie, any thought on this?
Yeah, bear with me because this is something that I've been kind of turning over in my head recently, and I haven't really formulated it. But I just finished Carl Sagan's book, The Varieties of Scientific Experience, and it's a transcript of talks he gave in the 80s on evidence and God. And there's a part where he says he's kind of bringing up the idea of, if they're a godlike entity kind of communicating with us, and looks to the Bible and kind of just brings up, what if there were encoded messages? So what if thousands of years ago we had just had some fragment handed down to us that said the sun is a star? We wouldn't have known what that meant, but thousands of years later we would figure it out. And I was reading this, and maybe just because I have so much ModPo going around in my mind, I looked at that line, and that line was poetry. And so it kind of got me thinking about poetry as science that has kind of yet to be revealed. And so I don't know. I've just been thinking about that a lot.
Wow. You took that question and ran with it, and ended up talking about a convergence of science and poetry, or finding the poetry in science. Thank you, Allie. So we brought Laura up to the table. Laura, why don't you lean forward close to the mic? And what's your response to this? I mean, I've read so many articles that say poetry is dead, nobody's interested in poetry, the only people out there are the poets themselves, nobody reads poetry anymore. Then we put out this MOOC last year, and we got 36,000, eventually 42,000 signed up. This year we're up to almost 36,000. What explains that?
As someone who's tried to take science classes on Coursera, I feel like I'm sort of uniquely poised to answer this question. I think that ModPo does it better than the science classes. When I watch the video discussions, I feel like I'm sitting in on a grad class. And the science classes I've taken have been primarily, you just watch someone stand at a podium and sort of read their notes, and it's kind of awful. I keep at it because I'm taking the classes because I want to learn things, but it's so much more engaging to watch a group of people talk about things, and then I'm watching and I'm having my own ideas and I'm taking notes, and I feel like I'm in the class even though I'm not actually in the class physically.
Dave Poplar, we're gonna after your response to this, we're gonna go to another question. You've thought a lot about this. You've been studying the MOOC phenomenon. You've been a critic of certain aspects of it. I know you could go on at length about this, and I don't want you to do that, but just, what's your response to this issue? I mean, why is the humanities alive and well, and why is a MOOC appropriate?
Well, just 2 quick points. One is that with the growth of technology, it's growing at an exponential rate, and the effect it has on the STEM subjects more than any other type of subject, it really puts our focus on those types of things, and we run the risk of losing the importance of subjects in the humanities, like poetry. The thing about ModPo as a MOOC is that it uses that form, but it leverages it in a totally different way than all the other subjects. So while technology is increasing, and we think it's increasing in the ways that really serve the STEM subjects, ModPo and poetry comes in and uses that, but uses it in a slightly different way. And for the people who want it, it can be really more effective.
Well said. So we have a call coming in. Do you want to Julia, either quote a comment that's come in or
Yeah, we have
something from Twitter?
We have a question about the death of a toad.
Okay, let's do it.
So maybe we could turn to
Death
that
of
poem.
the Toad. All right.
So this is a question from Christian Sabido on the discussion forums, who asks, so after all the poems earlier in the course where the literal reading was bypassed in favor of a meta reading, so reading each poem as a meta poem, why haven't we read the death of a toad as a meta poem?
All right. Well, should I try a snarky answer to that question? I mean, would anybody be annoyed by a snarky answer? Because it's not a meta poem. It's a poem it's a satire of a suburban guy running over a toad. I mean, it's possibly a meta poem insofar as Richard Wilbur is showing us his extraordinary talents as an inventor of a form and his amazing ability to choose words and rhyme them. So maybe that's meta-poetic in that he's showing off in a way that's not that alien from, Gertrude Stein showing off. There's a certain virtuosity. But what do you think, Julia Block?
I think
you think I'm right. It's not really a meta poem.
I think. Well, I mean, Christian makes a good point that it's over the top. It's exaggerated. So isn't the form kind of making the point that the content is making, which is that the death of a toad is something only to be spoken about in an exaggerated way and over dramatized way. So I can see the point, but I think I'm with you that there's not a meta quality to the form of the poem itself.
I mean, all poetry is aware of itself as a formal thing, because when you reach the end of a poetic line, you decide to, push the return button. That consciousness is different from prose, which just rolls over the next line, and when they publish it, they decide where the line ends. Mm-hmm. And that in itself, I suppose, creates the kind of self-consciousness that rises to the level barely of being metapoetic. In that sense, all poetry is metapoetic. But I think we've been using metapoetry in a narrower sense. When a poem is partly about the poem itself, it's a metapoem. So many of Dickinson's poems, maybe all of them, are metapoetic because they're all interpretable as being about the act that's happening as she writes it. And you don't have that sense there. I don't know. I have to just say that this thing that's been sitting here, it's been sitting here like this. I think Chris Martin has this frog. It's not a toad, it's a frog. But tonight, when I arrived, it was there like this. Zach, can you get that? There it is. I don't know if we're seeing. There it is.
We're seeing it.
Long live the toad. Any thoughts before we go to the phone call? Any thoughts on Death of a Toad, Dave Poplar? And then I'd like to go to Max or Allie after that.
I could just take a quick stab at a metapoetic reading and say that it celebrates the artificiality. In a sense, it seems like he's talking about the artificiality of being in suburbia and making that grandiose.
Yeah.
And that's why the poem itself is so grandiose, just like the grandiosity of suburbia.
Mock heroic, which is a critique of suburbia. And Wilbur was, though, in this case and later, poetically conservative, sorry to use that term, but not an experimenter in the way that the modernists were, but a political liberal, for what that's worth. Voted for Stevenson as opposed to Eisenhower. That's Adlai Stevenson and Dwight Eisenhower. That would sort of support, and what else we know about Wilbur would support that this is a critique of suburbia, and so there you go. Max or Allie, a thought on this Toad poem before we go to the phone call?
Sure. Well, I like to say that I never met a poem that wasn't also a meta poem, but I think we already covered the extent to which all poetry is meta poetry.
Right.
But I think the argument against this poem as being a meta poem in the sense that we've been using it is contained in that first line. A toad the power mower caught. What he's invoking there between the toad and this being mangled by this modern suburban engine of at once like keeping your lawns clean, but also it's become like really some kind of mechanized horror here, and that it's like mangling these animals. and there's no sense of anything really being mangled, right? All we get is the even lawn, really, in this poem that the lawnmower produces, and we don't actually get in the form anything that's been chewed up or really
clipped
damaged.
of a leg, Max. Clipped of a leg. That's about as clean as you can get.
That's much too clean, especially once in that first line we're just in that nightmarish scene, or we should be, and then we're instantly brought out of it and brought into this strange satiric, maybe quasi-satiric world.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the phone. Lily, who's calling?
It's John Knight calling.
John Knight from Washington, D.C.
Yes.
All right, let's put him through. Steve, can you bring him up? Hello, John.
Hi.
How are you, buddy?
I'm fine.
We miss you here. We'd like you to come back for a webcast.
Well, I'm doing a consultation in Philadelphia to some charter schools, and so I'm up there pretty frequently. So I probably will get a chance to be there.
Okay, great. Do you have a comment or question?
Well, I of course I have two comments, but I'll start off with the first one was my reading of our poems, the two supposedly Imagist poems by Williams.
Oh, yes, Young Woman at a Window, 2 versions.
Yeah, Young Woman. Well, the first version, and looking at it this time, I came to the conclusion that it was a highly confessional poem, and I understood that he didn't publish it in his lifetime, and I think that perhaps the reason he didn't was discretion.
Wow. Are you going to tell me that he's the father of the child?
No. I'm going to say that he sees that the child is him, in the sense he is the child.
I see.
He is the guy who despoiled women every way he could. When he was a child, like a baby who's the baby of an unwed mother ruins her life, so she cries. But here's that little baby sitting in his mother's lap, rubbing his nose.
Yeah.
Now, rubbing your nose, if you're Bill, has a
We've seen his
meaning.
nose before, yeah.
So that's what I thought.
John Knight, you're doing a psychobiographical reading of it, and according to your reading, I'm guessing, he rewrote it in order to suppress all of that confessional quality.
I would say he did that, and he was angry at doing it.
Nice job, John. You just screwed the whole plan, but that's all right, because you're the best. We love you so much.
Then the other thing is I have a comment, what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
I mean, I take computer science courses. I'm a STEM-type person, but I see what you said last year really touched me. You said something to the effect, talking about poetry on its own gives people a deeper level of communication. And what you've done is you've created an environment where people communicate very deeply. The Politics and Prose crew gets together every weekend and spends up to 3 hours just completely committed to talking about the inner meanings of poems.
Yeah. John, thank you. It's great praise, and I'm glad that you're part of this community. And the Politics and Prose group meets on Saturdays, is that correct, or Sundays?
Saturdays or Sundays. We use the doodle to decide which is.
And how would a Washington D.C. area ModPo person who's not part of the group find the group? Is there a?
They can find the doodle on the Politics and Prose thread. Every time Anthony puts out, we start for a new weekend. You can go into that thread, pick up the doodle, and pick the hours you want to be there.
Okay,
and then we decide on who's going to have be there the longest time.
Great. So that's to repeat. Politics and Prose has a thread. You search for Politics and Prose, you find it. Anthony Kolosny is one of the people who does this. You find it, you find out when they're going to be there, and if you're passing through Washington or you're in Maryland or Virginia, you should go. And one of the great things about this experience for us has been the study groups. So Anyway, thank you, John, for calling. And the next time you're in Philly doing your consulting with charter schools, please stop by.
Oh, okay.
All right, take care. Good night.
All right, bye.
215-573-9742. Julia Block.
So we have a question from James Gregorio, who writes, "Greetings, Al and ModPoers. This has been a transformative class for me. I was particularly moved by Cullen's Yet Do I Marvel, especially the last line, to make a poet black and bid him sing. This reminds me of Dunbar's sympathy in the famous I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Paul Lawrence Dunbar.
Both use the idea of repression and expression, in this case, singing. Care to comment, ModPoers?
Who would like to comment on that? This is a poem that is not straight on part of the ModPo curriculum. It's a poem that I referred to in the audio intro. Does anybody know it well enough to comment? I guess I'm the one. Jamie. Jamie, would you come up and take the seat here? And let's give Laura a big hand. She comes all the way from New York, having had a full day as a lawyer, gets put on the spot, and does great. And here comes Jamie. So, Jamie, what do you think about that last line of that poem by County Cullen? It's a sonnet.
It is. It's actually, it's very reminiscent to me of Audre Lorde's Coal, poem on coal, and the trope of blackness as an identity that one can write through, and that one can become through writing. So there's this duality in the poet and the poem. Yeah. And it showcases the relationship between the poet and the poem in a way that is very powerful, and I understand why it resonates with your question with James.
Yeah, good response. Cullen really agonized about this, right? He was happy that God had made him a singer, poet. And he was proud that God had made him, as he put it, black. But he realized that to do both things at once, or to be both things at once, was difficult in this world.
And I think that's, going back to the question of different modernities and the experience of modernity, I think one of the experiments that one does when one writes poetry is figuring out how to communicate one's multiplicities through the writing. It's almost like a writing of self. Right. And I think in this instance, you're talking about the value of voice, but also the trouble of having your voice recognized in a way that is structurally significant, both through poetry and through the reader's reception of your poetry.
And you were the one earlier, when you were sitting on the back bench there, who suggested that Cullen came in for criticism because he chose traditional songs, forms that were associated with the white Anglo-Saxon tradition. He uses, of course, this is the same problem that McKay faces. He chooses the Shakespearean sonnet.
Of course, yes.
So doing that, he felt like, I'm being the poet I want to be. But this feels like it's Sisyphean. It feels like I have to climb a long hill only to start over again. And one of the things that one admires about that poem is that the act of constraining himself in order to do the form perfectly feels like the agony of his identity.
Well, it's interesting because we talk about double consciousness in racial terms, but County Cullen is really illustrating what double consciousness is for the poet. Yes. And as a white reader, one can read the poem and experience what double consciousness means without changing race.
Cool. So when Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, uses the concept of double consciousness, you're saying he does it that's kind of a content thing, but it takes the poet to create a formal recognition of that in such a way that allows us to experience the doubleness.
I think when one is reading from a position of privilege and reading in a language that one's used to being addressed in, it's much easier than to see the difficulty of someone who's breaking into that language, not as an assuming member, and understanding the agony therein, because you are being addressed in the language that you assume is beautiful. Right. So seeing him struggle with, having perfection essentially and still not being able to fully
Right.
express himself
Nice. Well
is
put.
what you see in the poem.
Right. So he achieves perfection. If he didn't have that second identity, it would be widely recognized as
Exactly.
perfection.
Right.
But because he sings and is black, he's going to be second-guessed, and he second-guesses himself within the form of perfection.
Which is why the critique of him sounding too white is so important, because that's almost like his goal, right?
Yeah.
Is to question that by doing it.
Right. And you can see why you were on the bench before, now you're at the chair, but you can see why the discussion, you're saying, so I find Cullen to have modernist impulses, right? It's a very profound thing to say, because this is his way of grappling with the problem. If he had just freed himself and done a Steinian or HD-esque liberation,
No one would have read him.
No one would have read him, and he would have been accused of the same thing, probably, which is easy freedom.
Well, and the whole question of modernism is always problematic because everyone accuses modernism of wanting to break from tradition, but you have to acknowledge tradition in order to break from it. So
Yes,
there's
of
always
course.
that tension, and that's something that Cullen works
Yes.
with very well.
Yes. Yes. So that's great. Jamie, come on, let's...
I'm going to go back there.
Hey, Max, give it up for Jamie, Max. Come on, snap those fingers.
Hi,
there
Max.
he is. There he
Hope
is.
you're doing well.
Hi, Jamie.
All right, and she's even leaving the seat. And we're going to pick up the phone, but I had an idea, but the applause drove it out of me. So let's just go right to the phone. Lily, who do we have?
It's Moshe calling from Israel.
And the call, he was able to get through this time. That's great. All right, bring him up. Moshe.
Hi.
Hello there.
Good morning here.
Good morning, good evening, whatever it is. It's a big, small world.
Yeah, it is a very small world, and I'm sorry, I'm not synchronized with you. I don't know what you were talking about because I was listening to the telephone and to the webcast, so
That's
I
okay.
don't know, but I want to make a few comments, and that's it.
Okay.
First of all, I got the Kelly Writers House mug today.
You have a
so I'm
mug, you
probably
got
the
it.
only one in Israel who owns it. Second,
Hey,
I wanted to say,
Moshe, would you do us a favor and take a photo of you in the mug and send it to us?
Okay, I will do so.
Okay.
All right. And I wanted to make a comment. In the previous webcast, somebody made a comment regarding English as a second language for those who study ModPo. I think it is more difficult for us to read American poetry, but it should not be translated. And as an example, today I listened to your analysis of the mending wall, and at the end you mentioned that you asked what breaks the wall, and you said frost. There is no way you can understand it or translate it or do something with it in Hebrew or in any other language.
Very
frost
good point.
is frost. Yeah. That's it. It's an author and it's a frost.
That was very clever. That was a very clever thing that we did there. I apologize for that.
Why apologize? It is good. Poetry should not be translated. And,
that was a false apology, but I mean, it's. I feel like that is almost too much of a punchline. It's too clever. No.
No, it was good. It was good. It just it put an emphasis on my argument against translation.
Okay.
It's not prose. Prose is different.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say one word about this magnificent poem, Truth.
Yes.
I think this is a poem that shows how many interpretations can be done to it, because the geography and ethnic relationships make a difference, or religion. I could make it think that or interpret it as something that was written by concentration camp refugee survivor, and the son is the American rescuers who came to, or a refugee refugee from Cambodia or or a survivor from Serbia, for example. Had I not known the background of the author, of Gwen Brooks, I would make this interpretation. And this is, by the way, this is modernism. I can make my own interpretation. It is open.
And Moshe, let me respond to that. Because I've been thinking about this for about 4 hours, because you and I had a little conversation about this in one of the discussion forums today. And I think it's a great reading, and I think Gwen Brooks intentionally left that open.
Yeah.
Right? And I think you're running with it exactly the right way.
By the way, it was written in 1949, so it is very close to that period of
well, you've got
the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, you've got something of a historical reading to support you, and she meant that poem to be open. Most people read the sun as S-O-N, as the Son of God. Some people read it as the morning, and you're reading it as liberation. And your reading is the only one that I know of that helps us understand the use of the term shelter, and also the, shall we say, mixed feeling of liberation, which is liberation.
Yes, exactly.
Liberation for someone, a victim or a near victim of genocide, is never pure liberation, so that the night still lingers in the day. And I think it's a great reading.
I want to make two more comments, short ones. One,
Moshe, make one, because we're going to run out of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you, since you have so many poetry readers and participants, why don't you lead a world peace movement with this group, and we may resolve some problems around the world?
Ask the question again. I want to really understand it.
I said so many readers and so many participants in this ModPo course.
Yes.
You should lead a world peace movement with these people to solve some problems around the world.
I thought that's what you said. Julia, please answer this. I love you, Moshe. This is you're really throwing it on us here. Should we, Julia? Serious question, all right? And I'll go to Allie too with this. Should we do something for real? Should we have a real effect? Or should we just sit around talking about poems?
I would like to believe, and I do believe, that what we're doing does have a real effect, because we're changing the way people look at language. And we're surrounded by language everywhere. We're surrounded by language every time we pick up a form to fill out for some kind of paperwork in our lives. We are surrounded by language when we talk to our kids or our friends or our families or people we work with. And I think what we're doing in ModPo, works everywhere. So I think of it as a kind of peace movement.
I kind of wish that John Knight was still on the phone.
Any computer class or something like that.
Allie, your thought on this? Did you hear what Moshe was suggesting?
Yeah. It's so hard when you start to think about affecting real change, whatever that is, especially in the arts, I think. I think one of the conflicts just of the ages has been, what does art actually do? And how much of a real tangible effect can it actually have in changing the world in times of crisis? And whenever I get too wrapped up in this, I just kind of think of the phrase, just one act of kindness makes a difference. And I think looking at poetry, I think it works in the same way, because just getting one person to, expand the way that they think and the way that they communicate with others, it's baby steps, but I think that's extremely important. And if it changes one life, then you're doing an awesome thing.
Moshe, I just want to say two things really quickly, and then we'll say goodbye to you. First, I'm always heartened. Maybe I emphasize this too much. Some people, well, they haven't said this, but I'm sure some people feel this. I get a little smushy and emotional at these webcasts because I'm stunned by the people all over the world who care about each other and who come together with a common interest in poetry, but also the topics that poetry raises. But it's also the case that when some ModPo person needs help or needs some ideas or needs a ride, or right, that people come to, they want to do this. There's an incredible kindness in the human beings when they realize international cooperation is the only method you can do. And the other point I want to make is this, that I believe that by spreading teaching, the teaching response, by having Jamie stay up late after a day at the University of Pennsylvania Press where she's doing, I think, marketing or something. No. Translation. I was wrong about that. Then she comes and well after 10 o'clock, you know, she's sitting here being brilliant about race and form, poetic form. I didn't do that, she did. All I did is kind of convene it. And, you know, I was the fancy faculty guy who got permission to run a MOOC. But the work is being done by, you know, the Jeremy Dixons who come from Wales and hang around Philadelphia and turn us all on to things in Philly we didn't even know were there. And you, Moshe, appropriately, you didn't criticize me. You pointed out to me that in this week of videos, I was a little impatient with the TAs. They don't even remember it because they were just so happy to be done with it. But yeah, and I was a little impatient. And you can be sure I'm not that impatient in subsequent weeks, but that's where I'm at my worst. I'm at my best when I decenter the teacher so that a lot of other people are doing the work. That is the pedagogy that has to go along with the MOOC, and that's got to be some minor form of a peace movement. Because when we teach, we learn better.
True.
So, Moshe, bless you. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, and I salute you all.
All right, take care.
Can I just add something really quick?
Yes,
Mark
please.
Drexler just posted to the discussion forums, one of every 200,000 people on the planet is enrolled in ModPo.
What?
So I can't do the
You
math
couldn't be right.
fast enough, but
Well, that's impressive.
But it's something. It's
Mark,
something to
if
think
you put
about.
it that way, I'm very impressed. Max, are you impressed?
I'm impressed. I did the math in my head and it works out. Yeah.
You did the. Oh, now we're impressed. Max, you have a way. You have a way of taking what is to be impressed about something else and making us impressed by you.
Oh no, that's not me doing that.
Okay. All right, we have a phone call coming in, but before that, Julia, what's going on? I'd like to invite Ken. Would you like to take the seat? Are you okay taking the seat? You want Eric to do it?
I'll pass to Eric.
Okay, Eric, do you want to come up? Okay. All right, Julia, what do we got for Eric?
There's actually a really nice question on Twitter about If We Must Die, the sonnet by Claude McKay.
Yes.
And it's from Shiness Israel, who wonders, isn't McKay turning tradition on its head by using the sonnet to speak about the agony of identity? So is this poem turning the sonnet on its head to talk about identity?
Okay. It's Shania. I met her the other day. Yeah. Well, that's not her real name, but anyway, yes. Shana. It's Shana. Shana Israel. Yes. Hello, Shana. Yeah, we all know Shana. She was here the other day. Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Is Claude McKay's poem, If We Must Die, turning the sonnet on its head
Okay.
to talk about identity?
All right. Eric, can you do that just looking at it spontaneously? Oh, Eric.
Well, yeah, it's, not just a call to arms, but a call to ears. I think what's happening here is, and now I'm going to just take a little historical perspective. Coming out of a British colonialism, and experiencing
Jamaica.
And Jamaica, where, as I believe someone had mentioned, people were taught to feel as if they were little black Britons until they actually encountered British people, and then they were told that they, the Irish, the Jews, and the dogs were not allowed. There's a connection between the imperialism of the British experience and the racism and imperialism of the American experience. And I think that that diasporic identification was very powerful for McKay. One of the things that I think a number of these poets felt was the shock that a racist would feel at the mastery of form.
Right. By someone like McKay.
Absolutely. And he proves himself to be absolutely a master of this form. There's something in this of the speech of Henry V, I think, in Shakespeare.
Yes.
And something of the power of reaching out to the people and making you want to be identified, making you willing to go to the wall.
Right. And as I think I was the one to say in the video discussion of this, it boils down to McKay daring people, you know, the racist, those who committed racist violence, to which McKay argued in the content of the poem we should respond with counterviolence. It's as if he's saying, if you destroy me, you destroy a perfect instance of Shakespearean English. Go ahead, make my day.
Right.
And kill yourself. Thank you. That was great. Lily, who do we have on the phone?
It's Carolyn from the Bay Area with a question about frost.
About frost. Okay. Let's bring Carolyn up. Okay. Hello, Carolyn. This is Al.
Hello, hello. My name is actually Caro. It's K-A-R-O.
Carol.
Yes.
K-A-R-O. Caro.
There you go. So my full name is Carolina, but it sounds too official, so I just go by Caro.
Great. Are you in San Francisco?
I'm in Palo Alto, which is kind of in between San Francisco and San Jose.
Yeah. Palo Alto. Are you a Silicon Valley person?
I'm married to one.
You're married to one. Which is worse?
Actually, he also studied philosophy, thankfully. So actually, we have lots of things to talk about.
Does the person you're married to work in a startup or some giant place like Google?
Giant place like PayPal and Yahoo and all those.
Okay. So while he or she is doing tech work, you are doing ModPo.
Yes, and I am so inspired. In fact, I am now going to write a book that combines my love of poetry and life coaching, because I learned through ModPo that we have so many life lessons that we can take from all those poems.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So,
Carol, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes. I do have a question, because I was a bit scared today when I was listening to the video discussions.
Did you say you were scared?
Yes. Just, of my own stupidity, really. I'll tell you why. Because, I was listening to the video discussion of Robert Frost's poem.
Yes.
And you guys mentioned that it might be that it is a critique of, modernism, and also that the neighbor might be Robert Frost's alter ego.
Yeah.
And I thought, I totally agree with the analyses after you guys had pointed them out. But I listened to the discussion by Rachel and all the other poets, and I loved, the pointing out of iambic pentameter and things like that. But if I wouldn't have listened to the discussions, are there any word cues that tell you that, those analyses that you guys did, that they are indeed true?
Are there any word cues in the poem that give us evidence of what? Of that the neighbor is the alter ego?
Exactly.
Okay. Great. Good question. All right, guys, let's get to work. Find evidence in the poem, Emily, that we can say that the figure on the other side of the wall is essentially a shadow of the speaker, is a version of the speaker. Can you do it? Dave? Max? Are you looking at the text, Max? Allie? Anybody? I'll start, Carol, while these guys are...
Okay.
I can hear the wheels turning in Poplar, who's sitting next to me. He needs a little WD-40 for those wheels. For me, the main issue is the kabuki dance of this poem. The guy on the other side didn't get a chance to say anything except the sort of thematic catchline, which is not even his, it's his father's, allegedly. So to me, it's always about projecting your unself-conscious self, the pretend farmer guy that Frost tried to do. But in the end, while these guys, I'm stalling for time again, in the end, I don't think it matters whether it's an alter ego of Frost or some dupe in the some real farmer he's got set up so he can write a fabulous poem about the differences between the self-conscious poet farmer and the real farmer who doesn't even think about why they do this ritual every year. Emily, did you find any evidence?
Not in a particular word, but the very conceit of this poem, I think, indicates that this farmer guy is just a prop for Frost's aesthetic sort of position that he's offering here. All the farmer does, he just shores up the insularity of Frost, and Frost shores up the insularity of his particular world. And as such, he does work as a type of alter ego, someone who facilitates and participates in this idea of the necessity of hard and fast boundaries, of walls and clear delineations between things.
Well said. Dave, any thought on this?
No, I like exactly what Emily said. He's the straight man. The neighbor is the straight man against whom Frost can riff. Frost talks about he's being mischievous. And, what are your apples going to eat my acorns? Or he's just riffing off this guy who he makes fun of for being just wedded in tradition.
Mm-hmm. Max, any thought on this?
Well, I'm always struck by the line, "We meet to walk the line," and I don't know if that sheds light on the question at hand, but that's where the poem for me most approaches the kind of presence we get in Sid Corman, for instance. We meet to walk the line. You and I meet to walk the line, walking the line of this poem, and that's really the one instance where
could be the other guy, could be the reader, could be us.
Well, yeah, but
we meet in this poem to walk the line.
It's only there because the rest of the poem it turns back, and as Emily and Dave have been saying, we pull back from that and we see the neighbor as this savage, right, who's carrying the stones and who's also kind of a dimwit and somebody that he can sort of make fun of by talking about elves. So we get really close to that point, when we're at the line together at the wall, but then we move back again.
Good, Max. I like that. And I also like the fact that the most self-conscious and the most metapoetic moment, the one you just pointed out, is also the most traditionally iambic. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. It's so much iambic. It's unbelievable how iambic it is. And on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. You don't get that kind of iambic so emphatically. He knew what he was doing. So interesting. He steps forward toward the modern self-consciousness and steps back at the same time to emphasize the Anglo tradition or supposed tradition. Allie, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, if you look at the dialogue between them, the Frost character has I think 8 lines of dialogue that it's not clear whether he actually says, and I think there's more of a sense that he doesn't. It's just an internal dialogue. And if it's an internal dialogue, it's an internal dialogue with himself. So that's what I would look at if I was going to argue that point. But I also think, it's open to interpretation.
That's great. Julia?
Can I add just something? I'm looking at the end of the poem. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only, and the shades of trees. So there's something important there, I think, about this figure moving in a darkness that it's not just the literal darkness of what we see in the landscape. There's another kind of darkness there, or invisibility, or this figure being hidden or in shadows.
Or savage.
Or even
right?
savage.
Dark.
Yeah.
Dim.
And shade.
Jeremy
as
is
a
saying
ghost
something
or-
about shade, yes.
Yeah.
Right. And shade would also describe a person who's not real, an alter ego, a ghost. Carol, are you still there? Carol?
Yes,
Hi.
yes. I was just listening to you guys. You guys are brilliant and you rock.
So, Carol, thanks for being in ModPo, and thanks for being so enthusiastic. And I hope you will drag your spouse to a live webcast, and the two of you can sort of meet. You can
totally.
meet at the wall that separates technology from poetry and walk the line between you once again.
That's so beautifully said. No, I don't have to drag him, actually. Actually, we do talk quite a lot about the course, so it's all good.
All right.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
so many
you, Karen.
poems are beautiful and moving. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much. Well, boy, I like doing this. We're going to wrap up since we blew the clock, right? Because we were going to start this at 9 p.m. Philadelphia time. It's now a 11:15. I'm not even sure what happened, but I don't know what happened. So, Jewel, what I like to do is go around, and I want to get everybody in the room just to say one thing. It could be about anything. It could be about ModPo. It can be about your life. It can be about the commuting that you did today. It can be about one of the poems. It can be about somebody else in the room. Let's just go around and get everybody to say one little thing. It's got to be really brief, all right? Really brief. So let's swing around. First, Allie, say anything. This is your final word tonight.
I don't know. I love the idealism that's been present in this webcast.
Oh, cool. You really liked Moshe's question, didn't you?
Yeah.
That was great. I didn't see that one coming. Max? Final word.
I just want to say that I kind of like the anti-modernists a little bit, and that I think that they by being sort of anti-modernist or formalist or whatever, they help to reveal what form does or what it means and give us a richer understanding so we can move forward.
That's great.
From there, to get into progressively more anti-formal people.
That's cool, Max. I mean, we send you to the University of Chicago, and you start to get square on us.
I said, yeah. Well, it's a square place.
All right, that's cool. That's
feeling
great,
square.
Max. I'm glad you said that. Emily, final word, quick.
Just that I wouldn't want to spend a night staying up waiting for YouTube to come back with anyone other than you guys.
Oh, Emily, what are you doing?
Don't worry, Al. I can be sentimental too sometimes.
Wow. I'm marking this date in my calendar.
I'm glad.
Dave?
I still feel badly for the toad.
Can we just get one more shot of the toad? There's our totem toad. Clipped of a leg. I can't believe that diction. Clipped of a leg. No, it's clipped of a leg, I think. There it is. There it is. Okay, great. Julia, final word?
I want to do a shout out for the new Poem Talk podcast that went up recently on If We Must Die with Salamisha Tillett, Herman Beavers, and Kathy Lou Schultz. I was re-listening to it this evening. It's fabulous, and I encourage everyone to check it out. You can find it on the ModPo homepage.
It's on the ModPo homepage, and you can just go to jacket2.org, and find it there. So the timing of that was perfect, right? Unbelievable. It's all for ModPo. ModPo's the center of this universe. So, Jason, a quick final word, and then pass the mic around. Jason.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with the death of a toad, and and the way that there are no people in it except a mower, and it threw me to. This will be very quick. Ode to a Mousy by Robert Burns, which if you read against
absolutely.
it ends with the mouse looking ahead to hope or something, or the best laid plans of mice and men. But the toad is only appearing to look and is dead. There is nothing to see. There is a yard that is not seen, and that is all very sad.
I hear also. I'm cutting you off.
Wait,
I'm like Dickinson's bartender.
Wait.
You've had enough.
No.
You've had enough nectar.
What I'd say is, Barbara Ehrenreich's book "Dancing in the Streets," an ode to collective joy, is about how we have lost the ability to gather in a town square for festivals, or for that there are space. We have no spaces to come together and move in rhythm and celebration. And I think that what we were talking about before, that the rhythm of the language and the rhythm of our readings together is a kind of thing that brings together that carnival joy of everyone gathering at the town square.
This will be the place. Can we actually?
Well, I think
Zach's not on me. Oh, well, I'm coming from behind.
Those are the trees. That's
that
later.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, hold those for
All right.
later.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'll also add Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass is in there. The Castrate Lawn is the sort of castrated version of what Walt was after. And you also get the Mower poems of Andrew Marvell, where there the mower is a person, not a power object. Laura, the lawyer from New York, has the microphone. Be lawyer-like.
Well, I probably won't be, but unlike Max, I don't love the poems we did this week, but I think so. I've been thinking a lot about what to do about that, and I think it's important. It's just as important to focus on the poems you don't like, because the poems I do like, I know why I like them. I know what it is about them that I like, but when you don't like something, it's much harder to engage with it and figure out why you don't like it. And I think that's an important challenge.
That's so nice. Thank you. And thanks for coming. I hope you'll come back. Jeremy Dixon, we're so glad you spent time in Philly. Apparently you discovered that Philly is a great place to be.
It is.
Yeah.
I just want to say...
we have to thank you for spending a week with us, okay, Jeremy Dixon?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for the hospitality. I've had a great time in Philadelphia. I've sat on that chair. I've participated in this, so my life is complete.
Oh, Jeremy.
I just wanted to just quickly say, when we're saying about the success of ModPo, I think one of the aspects that we haven't discussed so much is that poetry allows us to talk about subjects, a whole wide range of subjects, on a very intellectual level, but with emotions.
Yeah.
And I think it's that emotionality of this course.
Yes.
Is what draws people together, and what you're doing is just fantastic.
And what you're doing too. Safe traveling back to Cardiff.
Thank you.
Come back again. Eric?
So this is a pedagogy poem. The sage on the stage is less wise than the guide on the side.
Nice. Yes.
And this, I think, speaks to both what you've done and also what Arnold Weinstein has done. Education is for every time in your life, and returning to texts that were meaningful to you, you will rediscover them and yourself afresh. So it's wonderful to have an open course where anyone can come and participate and refine themselves and the community of literature.
Thank you, Eric. That was beautiful. Thank you. Ken?
And I suppose I'm picking up on a number of these comments, but the source of my thoughts are Moshe's question about the impact of poetry in the world. I want to bring it to ModPo. I think that by modeling a collaborative approach to understanding this very difficult work, ModPo is modeling a way for poetry to have an effect in the world. It's the collaborative process that makes this work so well. And it's the collaborative process that'll make the world work.
Thank you, Ken. And safe traveling back to Mexico for you. We may see you one more time. Good. So not safe traveling yet. Safe traveling back to your home in Philadelphia. Jamie.
Hi. So I wanted to make a comment on the STEM versus humanities topic that we touched on earlier. So I really liked our callers. They came, they called in from all over the world and from various backgrounds, and I especially was impressed by the caller, Caro, who is married to tech person, as we like to call them, so officially. I don't think that they're opposed. I don't think that ModPo having 34,000 scholars and students and fanatics of poetry enrolled means that anything other than that, poetry is not going away, and I don't see science and poetry as opposed. I think that the love is there, and I would be curious to find out how many followers of ModPo are scientists. I think that there's this fear that if we have more science, we'll have less poetry, and I think what ModPo is showing us is that you can be a lover of the humanities and be anything by day and love poetry by night. So I'm glad that we exist.
Cool, Jamie, thank you. Lily, final word?
I guess I want to say that, like Max, and I'm guessing more people than just Max, I really also like this week's poems, but one moment that I'm glad that this is the anti-modernist week and not the modernist week is actually in that first line from Death of a Toad that Max described, because I think actually reading the poem in which, like, the mangledness of the toad was dwelled on in some kind of formal way would make me really sad, because I like toads a lot, so that's what I will say.
Can you give the mic to Steve? We need to give Steve a final word here. Here it comes.
I'll say purely by way of promotion, if you're listening to tonight's broadcast on Penn Sound Radio, stay tuned in. Up next is Gene Shepard from 1968 with a program called Spy Stories. And if you're listening and tune in the lower right, hit that little heart to put it on your favorites list.
Wow. Gene Shepard? Seriously?
Every night.
Penn Sound Radio rocks 24/7, and Steve curates it, and it's great. You just have to have it on all the time. It's amazing. So before I wrap up with a couple final comments, I want to thank Chris and Zach. You guys were amazing tonight because, of course, we had to deal with YouTube shenanigans. Oy, oy, oy. You guys were noble. You handled it. So thank you both. I want to conclude with a couple of shout-outs. One is to Julie Hansen-Scherer. 19 days ago, Julie posted something to the forums, which I'll read to you, and it's so jazzed and wild that I then sort of followed Julie. I'm not in a bad way, Julie. I began to watch, to look at your comments in the forums. She wrote, she was elaborating, the thread is called Have the ModPo Staff Noticed Universal Inspiration? And she writes, what I mean is, and of course that's in media res. I mean, I had no idea where she was starting. What I mean is there a spontaneous generation of ideas that becomes noticeable? I tried to write a really new title for my essay. That was the Dickinson essay. And I'm rather pleased. Still, I won't be surprised if there are dozens of similar titles. One, we're all working with the same base, but also I can't help feeling the ideas are thick in the ether and we're all picking up the vibes. This was her somewhat elaborate way of saying that everybody at ModPo is really creative. So she's posted 17 comments, 9 posts, and created 3 threads. Then, so I was just admiring what she's been doing in ModPo. Thank you, Julie. Then she went over to the Facebook page, and she explained, she was asking a very specific question. She explained that she's undergoing chemotherapy, and due to skin supersensitized by chemotherapy, she said that she's been having a reaction to typing on a keyboard. She gets a kind of sunburn from the keyboard, which is apparently one of the potential side effects of chemotherapy. She writes, I know there are people who experience this without other factors. Does anyone on this board, meaning in the Facebook group, have any experience with the problem and a solution, etc. And I'm only looking at 3 comments, which I'm not going to read, but there must be about 15 people who are trying to help her figure out how she can continue to put her fingers to the keyboard and write those jazzed, wired, wonderful, wacky, Julie-esque comments that makes ModPo, for me, such a delight to look at every morning when I wake up. So, Julie, I hope that the side effects are short-term. I hope someone can help you figure out how to keep your fingers on the keyboard, and if not, get one of those voice-operating, text-making softwares and stay with us, and best to you, Julie. And finally, a shout-out to Carrie Oleskowitz. So Carrie told us in the Facebook group that she had attended a parent-teacher conference with her 3rd grader, meaning her child, her 3rd grader. And the teacher explained why her 3rd grader, her daughter, why her reasoning was off during a science test. Jamie, I think I'm going back to the opposition, sorry. The science teacher told Carrie, who's in ModPo, that her daughter, the 3rd grader, her reasoning was off during a science test. Carrie says, I found myself calmly telling him there are 13 ways to look at a blackbird. Something has happened to me. Carrie, something has happened to you. Something has happened to all of us. Something is happening here, and we don't know what it is. So a lot of people responded, and I wrote, lucky kid having you as a parent. And she wrote, oh, thank you, Al, exactly the reinforcement I need. And then someone said, what the hell was the question that a 3rd grader got wrong, and had to, where the science teacher had to tell Carrie that the child was off. And you ready for this? The question was about the source of water. Instead of picking the cloud picture, my daughter picked the mountain picture and drew water running down the sides of the mountain. Up with alternative education. Up with open courses. Up with Carrie Oleskowitz. Down with narrow-mindedness. Down with the pedagogy of the right answer. Up with open interpretation. Up with thousands of people. Up with Moshe's interpretation of that poem by Brooks as about the liberation from a concentration camp. Up with it all. Up with John Knight and his wacky interpretation of the illegitimate child of William Carlos Williams. We want it all. We want it all. We want even more of it. So thank you all for continuing to scratch your heads and move forward. Next week, it's the beats. The rest of this week, we're doing our peer reviews. Please try to help us achieve the goal of 4 peer reviews at least for each of the essays. Go back in the forums and write comments. Thanks to everyone in Caro in Palo Alto, John Knight in D.C., Moshe in Israel, and everybody else. Good night and take care.